The Clippers did win Game 7. They won by the score of 126-111. All in all, this was a fantastic series. It was a back-and-forth series. This is actually the first game where a home team won their game at home. It only took 7 games to get to this point, but the Clippers do move on to the second round. Now, Kevin, now that the series is over, you have the Clippers going to round 2. What was your overall takeaway from this series?
Well, bias aside, Kawhi Leonard is that guy. Kawhi Leonard silenced all doubters, all haters. Every person that doubted he's a top 5, top 3 player in this league is just crazy. The man did it all the entire series. He cooked us in every facet: long ball, mid range, taking it to the basket, facilitating, rebounding, and obviously defending. He's literally almost like the perfect player minus his court vision, because a lot of times his assists came from, bailing out of a double team or finding somebody open on the perimeter because the double team came to him mid-quarter in the paint. So, I mean, Kawhi Leonard is just one of the greatest players in this league in today's day and age. And it was stellar to watch him at this capacity. I mean, like I said, as a basketball fan, you really tend to enjoy watching players like that. Unfortunately, it happened to be against my own team. But, I mean, the man we threw everything we could. We threw man-to-man. We threw zone. We threw double teams, traps, everything you could think of. And Kawhi just found ways to cook us. Paul George had some inconsistencies throughout the series. There were games where he was on. There were games where he was off. So I can't say that he was full-on pandemic P, and I can't say that he was playoff P. But at the end of the day, the Los Angeles Clippers did deserve to win this series just because they just played harder and their role players stepped up. Now, switching it over to the Mavericks perspective, Luka Doncic had 46 points, 14 assists, and 7 rebounds. But in a pivotal Game 7, he did have 6 turnovers and some costly bad shots. I would say his shot selection late in the fourth quarter, let alone the second half, were just not smart. And that just shows, again, inexperience, maybe overconfidence, maybe desperation. I don't know. Kristaps Porzingis scored his first double-digit game since, I think, Game 4. He had 16 points and 11 rebounds. Boban Marjanovic had 14 points. Tim Hardaway Jr. had the worst night in this series. He had 11 points on 5 of 14 shooting. Dorian Finney-Smith, again, I called him to be the X factor of this series. He had his first double-digit game since Game 1. He had 18 points. He had 10 rebounds with 6 offensive rebounds, but he did have 4 turnovers. So between Luka and Dorian, there's 10 turnovers right there. But our bench kind of screwed us. We had 6 total bench points in the entire game. Max Kleber played 9 minutes, 0 points. We had Dwight Powell come in, 2 for 2 shooting, 5 minutes, 4 points. Trey Burke, big question mark. I'll get into that in a second. He had 8 minutes with 0 points. Jalen Brunson, 10 minutes, 2 points. Josh Richardson, 6 minutes, 2 turnovers, 0 points. So, I mean, the starters did what they needed to do. They produced where they needed to. They played efficient basketball, other than Tim Hardaway Jr. having an off night, his first off night pretty much of the entire series, like I had said. But everyone else failed to kind of step up. Where it mattered most, the Clippers did what they needed to do. They didn't miss a single free throw. They shot over 45% from the three-point line. They shot 50% from the field. And then Dallas almost shot 50% from the field, under 30% from 3, and under 65% from the free throw line. So, again, the series was great. It was back and forth every game, other than this game and Game 4 where we got blown out because Luka's injury, and then this game where we kind of let the game get out of hand. Each game was close. Each game came down to the wire, and it just shows, we're missing that one piece. I don't know if that means Porzingis gets traded. I don't know if this means we go after Bradley Beal. I have no idea what's going to happen this offseason, but the Clippers advance, and they are going to face the Utah Jazz in the next round, and they rightfully deserve it, and it's going to be a good series.
I think all in all, the one thing that it showed me with this series is, like you mentioned, Kawhi is that guy. He stepped up for them in a big way in Game 6, dropping over 40 points in a must-win game on the road. He was absolutely sensational. And then you transition into Game 7. He had a very efficient game. 10 to 15 from the field, almost scores 30 points in the process. But the Clippers starters played extremely well. Batum, like you said, had 11. Kawhi had 28. Marcus Morris had 23. Reggie Jackson had 15, and Paul George had 22. It's pretty tough to combat with the starters, and then they were able to get some decent bench production, like you mentioned. And I think something that needs to be addressed here, just to kind of flip it to the Mavs for a second, is their over-reliance on Luka Doncic. That is one of the main takeaways from the Dallas side of things, because don't get me wrong, he had a fantastic game, dropping 46 points in a must-win Game 7. But the other players who started for the Mavs, they didn't step up. Tim Hardaway Jr. is one that kind of stands out to me because he was 1 of 9 behind the three-point line. And the Mavs had some good looks to knock down some threes to get back into this game. And they just weren't able to make it happen. And that's really kind of the standout thing to me, is that the Clippers were able to knock down their threes a lot better than the Mavs. And the one thing that really kind of stood out to me about the Mavs defense when it came to the Clippers shooting their threes is their recovery time to try to get back to the man that they were assigned to guard was really slow.
Well, you're in a zone, so it ended up being rotational issues because we always ended up leaving the corner open.
But they
which is what I said a while ago.
They were doubling Kawhi.
You have to.
And I was watching the defensive scheme that the Mavericks had against Kawhi and the Clippers. They put a little bit too much pressure on maybe guarding Kawhi, and guess what? It leaves those corner threes wide open. Marcus Morris made it a habit to knock down those threes in the corner, not only in Game 7, but in previous games throughout this series. And it came to bite the Mavs in the end. And I thought that this was a game that the Mavs, even though that they were down, they made a run at the end of the fourth quarter. And
we cut it to 7.
I thought they had a chance to get it to maybe even 1 or 2 possessions, but they couldn't knock down some shots. I think Reggie Jackson ended up knocking down 2 clutch threes at the end of the fourth quarter.
28-footer, bro. We had perfect defense on the sequence. Reggie jab steps on Tim and pulls. I was like, I'll live with a 28-foot three-point shot any day of the week by anybody on this team. That's a deep fucking three, and he swishes it. He doesn't just make it. He splashes it. And I was just like, well, there that goes.
And then at that point, pretty much the Mavs were dead in the water, and that's pretty much all she wrote. All in all, though, this was a fantastic series.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a classic 4-5 matchup that goes the distance. And just the odd thing from this series was the fact that no home team won a home game until Game 7. That's what really
first time in NBA history.
Yeah, so give credit where credit is due. The Clippers stepped up when they needed to, and they avoid really just an entire social media roast had they lost this series, because had they lost this game against the Mavs, the outpouring of roasting would have been swift and fierce towards the Clippers had they dropped this game. But yeah, my 2 biggest takeaways was, man, Kawhi is that guy, stepped up when he needed to. And I think the Mavs, they just rely a little bit too much on Luka. I mean, he shot over 50% shooting at 30 times. It's fantastic. But some of the other guys got to step up, and they just couldn't execute.